Welcome back everyone to another installment of Captured in Camera, where we look at different artists and photographers who use in-camera techniques, practical effects, and creative lighting to create real photographs that step away from documenting or depicting reality, toward capturing the imaginary, the illusionary, the surreal, or the unreal, and doing so without relying upon post-processing to achieve those reality-bending elements in their photographs. In the last video, I briefly introduced to you 28 photographers whose work broke away from pure realism using in-camera effects. Since then, I found 20 more artists who I'd like to share. From the comments on the last video, I read a request for me to spend a little bit more time on each artist, so I decided I would try that, and lo and behold, it seems like I have a little bit too much to say for a 10-minute video. So I'm going to try something a little bit different in this video and just focus on 2 or 3 photographers that I have a bit more to say about. Let me know if you guys like this format or if you prefer me to just run through as many artists as quickly as I can and as briefly as I can. Oh, and by the way, thank you for nearly 2,000 followers. I did not expect so much support for the few videos that I put up. And now onto our photographers. Abelardo Morell is a photographer known for turning rooms into camera obscuras and capturing the marriage of the interior and the exterior in large format photographs. I'm sure you all know what a camera obscura is, but just to review, a camera obscura, Latin for dark chamber, is essentially any dark space with a small hole that allows light rays to pass through and project an image of its surroundings onto a surface. It's basically a very simple camera that can be any size, from the size of a small pinhole camera to the size of a large room. And that's what Abelardo is doing here. He's turning interiors into cameras, the walls and furniture into a canvas for the projected image. Right away when I look at his interiors, I notice the empty chairs and I feel invited to sit down. For me, it brings up themes of memory and remembrance, about sitting down to think about one's day or reflect upon one's life. They feel very contemplative to me, and in a sense, because we're able to see the furnishings of the rooms, we're able to recognize that we're looking into rooms. And so we can see that Abelardo is doing more than just turning rooms into cameras. He's playing with this concept of projecting the surroundings onto the surrounded, in this case the neighborhood into the home. And I think that's a really interesting concept, because it can be used to express a wide range of ideas and feelings, depending on how the technique is executed, all the way from feeling anxious about or trapped by one's surroundings, to feeling connected with one's surroundings. The latter being a feeling I think he accomplished when he brought this concept outdoors. So in 1991, he began using a tent camera to project the outdoors onto the ground, and then capturing a photograph of that projection onto the ground with a film camera. And these have a very different feel from his interiors, even though it's essentially the same concept and technique. These are very painterly, they are impressionistic, and almost a little bit romantic. And the variety of the different ground surfaces connected with the image of the surrounding landscape is really such an interesting way to paint or depict a sense of place. Again, he's projecting the surroundings onto the surrounded, and by capturing not just what's in front of the traveler, but also what's beneath their feet, he's able to paint a really interesting portrait of a place and location, a portrait that ties together the grandeur of the landscape with the beauty that lies within its details. But now let's swing back to his interiors, because he also brings those into another direction. These shots are much lighter, more airy, more vivid, and because many of these include beds in the scene, it really makes me think about dreaming. So in that context, they feel a lot more like the room is analogous to the mind being immersed in the world of the dream. All of these different directions go to show that he's clearly not limited to exploring one mood or concept with this technique, and it's really cool to see how much he can extract from it. Abelardo is a versatile artist. This isn't the only type of work he creates. In fact, I think he actually has some of the most expressive and beautiful still life photographs I've ever seen, like up there with Weston and Caponegro. It's rare that I see still life photography that really emphasizes the character behind the form of different objects and turns them into something different, something more than just their utility to us in our day-to-day lives. His photographs of vessels are no longer about the objects themselves. It's almost as if he's using their forms to sculpt out new spaces for our eyes to explore. This photograph of glassware is full of movement and energy. The glassware has become a playground for experimentation with light. It's very abstract, and yet it reminds me of a set of blueprints. It's even almost reminiscent of Diego Rivera's murals of the assembly lines in the Detroit Institute of Arts. I'm not saying that's his inspiration, that's just what I see. And that's sort of the beauty of a lot of abstract work for me. And Morell does a lot of beautiful abstract work. Then he has a whole series of photographs of books, objects which are completely transformed by his vision. I can feel the weight and history of language with this photograph of a dictionary. And this water-damaged book has been twisted into this beautiful form evocative of natural wooden forms, wood from which this paper once came. I can sense the weight and the gravity of these books, almost as if I'm looking at what's in them rather than what they literally are. It looks like the words and lines in this book are heavier than the book itself. Like this is the portrait of a narrative and not just the paper that it was written on. And again, with these stacks of paper, I can feel their weight. He's making these look timeless. The lines on the paper almost remind me of the Earth's geological strata, even though it's just a stack of paper. It's so rare for someone to be able to take pictures of everyday objects and really make me feel something for them or with them. If you think those are cool, just wait until you see his woodblock series, because these are an absolute delight to look at. Some of these are multiple exposure photographs of carefully arranged blocks of wood cut into different sizes and shapes, which he photographs, I'm assuming, from different angles. And they're so satisfying to look at. Others are towering stacks with different light illuminating different cross-sections of a scene. These are an absolute joy to explore, and they really highlight how transformative his vision is to everyday objects, taking the ordinary and creating the extraordinary. He's just very artful. He even has a series of photograms, which if you've watched my video titled "Photography is not a screenshot of reality," then I know that you know that photograms are a type of photograph that is created without a camera, which is an art of its own, and his photograms are absolutely stunning. The textures especially are just so good. Abelardo has so much more for you to explore that I didn't touch on in this video, so please go check out his portfolio if you haven't heard of him before, because it is an absolute delight for a photographer to explore. Even if you've never heard of him before, you might even recognize this wonderful photograph, which I think is pretty well known across the internet. McCaw captures photographs about the sun, long exposures of the sun on film, and he utilizes the intense energy of the sun's focused light to burn and melt through sections of the negative that lay in the sun's path during these exposures. I find this fascinating because it pulls the physicality of the medium into the image as part of the image. The physical melted film traces the outline of the sun's path and echoes the intensity and force of nature that is the sun, which visually emphasizes the subject of this photo, the sun and its energy, which is really cool because pulling the physicality of the medium into the work is something that most photography tries to avoid. Most photography is concerned with verisimilitude, that is, the quality of appearing to be true or real. Most people see photographs as documents of reality, and within that context, most people prefer that the veil between the viewer and what has been depicted in the photograph to be minimized. This veil I speak of is the physicality of the medium, the physical materiality of the photograph itself, and our awareness of it. People often want photographs to serve like a window into another place or point in time in the world, almost like there's only a piece of glass between us and what's on the other side. When you're looking through a window, the more visible the glass is, whether it's dirty or cracked or highly reflective, the more aware we are of the glass itself and the less clearly we can see through to the other side. When we look through a clean window, it doesn't leave our awareness that the glass is there, but our attention isn't called to the glass. Our attention is on whatever we're looking at on the other side. With photographs, optical defects like chromatic aberration, lens flare, field curvature, and image defects like noise, color casting, clipped highlights, or shadows, those distract us from immersing ourselves in the illusion of what we're seeing and tug our attention back toward the medium, moving our focus away from what was depicted in the image toward how the image was created, toward the photograph as a visual object itself. It's not a perfect analogy, and that's not to say that anyone is ever truly convinced that they're looking at the real thing instead of just a photograph of the thing, but I think many of us still want to be drawn into the other side. We want to play along with what we see in them. There's still a type and degree of truth-telling many of us expect from photographs. Granted, we're much more suspicious now in the age of AI and Photoshop. I still think there's a desire, a tendency for many of us to believe what we see in them, or to at least suspend our disbelief. And that's why throughout history, most photographers have seen such photographic defects as something to minimize and avoid. Even throughout the film years, we were seeking increased resolution and sharpness, better grain structure, improved sensitivity, and dynamic range. The pursuit of photographic perfection has been here since the beginning. We took a brief step backward when digital first arrived, but we were still in pursuit of photographic perfection. Perfection perfection as being defined by verisimilitude. Again, that is the appearance of being real or true to life. And achieving that so far has looked like alleviating and remedying all defects and seeking to automate and replicate the perfectly exposed, visually objective, clear image. But now something kind of funny has happened at the end of this centuries-long pursuit. Our lenses have finally crossed a threshold of becoming so perfect, so undistorted, and so sharp, and our cameras so high resolution and visually accurate, that some photographers began to complain that their images are too analytical, too boring, almost cold and sterile, that the images lack character and are beginning to look lifeless. And as we developed all of this amazing camera equipment that delivered perfect results, you now see a new generation of photographers that are trying to return to analog film, seeking out what they believe to be more pleasing tones and grain and color because it feels warmer, it feels more organic, it feels like it has some soul to it. And it's not like film is just special or better than digital in this regard, because people are doing the same thing with 2000s era digicams as well, even trying to recreate the digicam look in post-production. And what they're really doing when recreating this look is trying to simulate or reintroduce defects and imperfections that for decades people have been trying to eliminate. Now, I call them defects because that's what they were seen as for the longest time and still often are seen as today. But as artists, you and I can step back from labeling them as defects and see them for what they really are. They are visual elements that we can use and take advantage of if they serve our image aesthetically or conceptually. Just as those who have been returning to film or the retro digicams from the 90s or 2000s are doing whether they realize it or not. They're using what some would consider to be defects as visual elements that serve their aesthetic, which in their case is typically nostalgia. But nevertheless, many of them feel that their photographs have more character and are more pleasing to look at as a result. Well, imagine if in a different timeline we broadly expected all paintings to be perfectly flat and devoid of physical texture. And since brushstrokes are defined by their texture, what if we determined that visible brushstrokes in a painting surface were a defect rather than a visual element that could be controlled and used for the purpose of the painting's aesthetic? Not only would the world of painting become very boring, it would also become very difficult to distinguish or identify one painter's work from the next. Anyway, that's my rant about how we ought to begin approaching photographic defects as visual effects. My rant about how we should embrace those defects and learn how to control them so that we can reincorporate them into our work appropriately, and also why they're a hallmark of the physicality of photography and why pulling the physicality of photography into our photographs can make them more beautiful. But back to Chris McCaw. I know that sounded like a crazy long-winded tangent, but that's really a big part of what makes me so excited about Chris McCaw's work. And not just because he's pulling the physicality of the medium into the image, a lot of retro photographers are already doing that, but because he's doing it in such a unique and purposeful way that is relevant to the meaning of the image. It's not some reach for the nebulous aesthetic of nostalgia, it's deliberate and impactful. These photographs are about the sun, and the sun is powerful, and he's using the sun's intense light energy to melt through sections of the film, which reinforces the idea that the sun is powerful. Which, if that had happened to most film photographers, they would have looked at it and said, this film is ruins, and they would have thrown it away. But for Chris, the melted negative is now intentionally a visual element that not only serves as an integral part of the composition, but as a part of the purpose of the image, depicting the sun as this inescapable, constant, and unstoppable force of nature that's bearing down upon all of us, which goes hand in hand with the trail that the sun leaves behind through the image. The sun is on a unstoppable path, sort of like the unstoppable passage of time that none of us can escape from. It really evokes the mercilessness of nature. Boy, what a treat. So now, instead of our gaze looking through the photograph at something, the sun has pierced through the photograph towards us, the viewer. These are very weighty, gritty images, and the subject matter here, at least for me, really is the sun as a force of nature, and it's quite incredible. And they wouldn't nearly have the same impact if they weren't burnt through like this. These images overall just look ashy, like they've been exposed to the heat of the sun, and I think it's really cool work. Now, Stephen Tack, one of our subscribers, shared a set of photographs with us from a really interesting experiment he's been doing. He's been shooting through color combining cubes scrapped from old 3 LCD projectors. Stephen explained how these work to me. These cubes have 3 faces with dichroic filters and a prismatic construction that directs light from all 3 of those sides out through a 4th unfiltered side. Stephen told me, and I wasn't even aware of this, that in older LCD projectors, the light from the bulb is split into 3 paths, which paths pass through 3 monochrome LCDs, and that light then enters the cube from left, back, and right, reducing them into red, green, blue light by the filters on each side, and then combined again by the prismatic construction, exiting out the front through the lens to be projected. I thought that was so cool, and the images he's capturing with these are really cool. Steven says, when put in front of a camera lens, the effect ranges from neutral color with rainbow fringes to monocolor with double images of different colors. I have it hot glued to a lanyard so I can wear it around my neck and use it in various orientations. And after looking at some of these images, I think I'm going to have to hunt around for an old LCD projector myself so I can get my hands on one of these color combining cubes. I mean, the results are really something to look at, like this. This is, I'm guessing, a single exposure, and you would have never guessed that unless you had heard the story behind it. Other shots almost look like they have beautiful light leaks, and some of the colors out of some of these photographs almost remind me of the colors you'd see out of DCG holography. These are very unique, Steven. I haven't seen much quite like this. Thank you for sharing these with us. A lot of these are truly stunning and definitely exhibit what's possible to capture in camera when you begin to play around with light. Beautiful work. If you are going to try to get your hands on one of these projectors, Steven gave us a few tips. They're best found in surplus sales or the garbage, and projectors that say DLP likely won't have the cube. He also mentioned that he found them fascinating to take apart and that they yield a treasure trove of optically interesting parts, as there are all kinds of lenses, surface mirrors, and color filters within them. So good luck to you treasure hunters out there, and remember to thank Mr. Tack in the comments below. Anyway, that is just a few of the photographers I found recently for the Captured in Camera series, and it took me well over 10 minutes to get through everything I had to say. So please tell me what you think. Did you guys like this video? Do you like this format? Did I ramble too much about my ideas on photography? Did you like hearing my interpretation of these photographs, or should I just focus on the technique? Would you watch these if they were a little bit longer, say 15 or 20 minutes? And finally, what did you think about the photographer's work? I have a lot more artists I want to share, but I might not get to them for a while as the weather is warming up and I'm finally able to start focusing on creating more photographs in the studio, which means I'll be able to create more videos of my own photography practice, but I would like to do this again in the future, so let me know what I can do differently. If this turns out to be a format that you guys do enjoy, I may go back through a lot of the photographers from the first video, so just let me know. Thank you all so much for all of your awesome comments and the subscriptions. Again, I wasn't sure what to expect when I uploaded my first video less than a year ago, but we've already unlocked the thanks button, so thank you. I'm really enjoying the little community here, and I feel good being able to provide something for you. You will hear from me again in the future. Take care.